Everybody's already looking at the Ravens' 2026 opponents and thinking the exact same thing. Man, Baltimore might have gotten really lucky this year. But honestly, the more I look at the bigger picture, the more I feel like there's a hidden detail here that could completely change the Ravens' season. And the crazy part is, the official schedule hasn't even dropped yet. But based on the information that's already coming out, you can start to see a very interesting setup forming for Baltimore. And depending on how the NFL builds this schedule, what looks like a huge advantage right now could quietly turn into a massive problem later in the season. You know what I think a lot of people still haven't realized about this game against the Dallas Cowboys in Brazil? The biggest issue might not even be the opponent. To me, the most dangerous part is everything surrounding that trip. Think about it. The Ravens are going to travel across countries, completely change their routine, deal with long flights, time zone adjustments, physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion, and then they still have to come back to the United States and continue the season like nothing happened. And in the NFL, that stuff matters way more than people think. Sometimes teams start slow not because they lack talent, but because the schedule destroys their rhythm in the first few weeks. And honestly, there's one thing I'm going to be watching very closely when the official schedule comes out: what the NFL does before and after the Brazil game. Because if Baltimore has to play on the road before the trip, then comes back and immediately gets hit with another difficult road game right after, that could become a huge problem early in the season, especially for a team entering a new era with a different coaching staff and a lot of moving pieces still trying to fit together. Now, one part of this report that I found really interesting involved the Houston Texans. The article brought up the possibility of the Ravens using Houston as a temporary base before traveling to Brazil. And honestly, I actually like that idea, because that could help the team stay more connected, more focused, and maybe even speed up the adjustment process for the new coaching staff. Former GM Marty Hurney even said something that perfectly sums up how these NFL schedule situations work. There are trade-offs to all this stuff. There really are. In other words, every advantage on the schedule usually comes with a hidden price attached to it. There's one thing about NFL schedules that people seriously underestimate. It's not just WHO you play, it's when and how you play those teams. And honestly, one of the worst things that could happen to Baltimore would be a long stretch away from home. Because think about it, traveling once is normal, but spending multiple weeks living in airports, hotels, airplanes, practicing away from your own facility, eventually that starts wearing down any roster. And even though the Ravens are a veteran team, that kind of grind still matters, especially at the beginning of a new era where a brand new coaching staff is still trying to find balance. Inside the locker room, the good news for Baltimore is they avoided one major problem. There really aren't any brutal West Coast trips that completely wreck your sleep schedule and force you through multiple time zones. Compared to a lot of NFL teams, the Ravens actually got pretty lucky there. But that doesn't automatically mean the situation is easy. Because if the NFL stacks multiple road games close to the international trip, the wear and tear could build up very quickly. And I thought it was really interesting when Marty Hurney talked about the yin and yang of NFL scheduling. Basically, he explained that every advantage usually comes with a hidden downside. If a team gets stuck with a rough road stretch, they'll probably get rewarded later with a nice homestand. But honestly, sometimes the damage is already done before that reward ever arrives. And in the AFC North, starting the season slowly because of schedule fatigue could end up costing you the division, playoff seeding, or even home field advantage later in the year. One of the biggest parts of this entire story, at least to me, revolves around Jesse Minter, because there's a huge difference between simply taking over a new team and starting your era while dealing with pressure, international travel, a difficult schedule, and fans demanding results immediately. And honestly, I think the beginning of this season is going to be huge for this team's confidence. The Ravens weren't nearly as dominant at home last year as they normally are, and that definitely stands out. Baltimore has always had that reputation of being one of the toughest places to play in the NFL. Loud crowd, intense environment, constant pressure on opponents. But recently, that edge hasn't felt quite the same. So imagine how important it would be for this team to open the season at home and start winning right away in front of the fans. For a first-year head coach, that changes everything internally. Confidence grows, pressure decreases, and the locker room starts buying into the new coaching staff much faster. But if the season starts badly, the conversation changes fast in the NFL. and we all know how quickly pressure builds in this league. Another really interesting point is that the entire AFC North is going through major changes right now. The article even highlights the departure of some longtime coaching figures around the division. And Marty Herney brought up a very strong point about facing rookie head coaches early in the season. He said, on one hand, you want to get a rookie head coach early while they are still trying to figure things out, but you also are getting them before you have film on them. In other words, a young coach may still be figuring things out, but they can also surprise you because nobody fully knows what their system is going to look like yet. When you look at the Ravens' opponents on paper, the schedule definitely looks less intimidating than some previous seasons. And I've already seen plenty of people saying, wow, Baltimore really caught a break this year. But honestly, I think it's way too early to buy into the whole easy schedule narrative because the NFL changes fast. A team that looks weak in May can become a serious problem by October. That happens literally every single season. And the article itself mentions teams like the Tampa Bay, Buccaneers, and Los Angeles Chargers as examples of offenses that could become much more dangerous as the year goes on. And there's another important thing people forget all the time. Sometimes, it's not just about how good a team is. It's about when you play them. Some teams start slow and catch fire later. Others come out hot and completely collapse halfway through the season. So a game that looks easy today could easily turn into a nightmare depending on where it lands on the schedule. To me, this is exactly the kind of situation that catches teams off guard. Because once everybody starts talking about how easy the schedule looks, the margin for error suddenly feels smaller. And in the NFL, overconfidence usually comes back to hurt you, especially in the AFC, where one bad stretch can completely change the entire playoff picture almost overnight. If you're enjoying this breakdown, smash that like button to help the purple flock grow. If there's one thing I'm going to look at first when the official schedule drops, it's the AFC North matchups. Because honestly, I think that's where Baltimore's season could truly be decided. The NFL has become almost obsessed with stacking division games late in the season. And that changes everything. You spend months building momentum. Then suddenly December arrives, and 3 or 4 games completely reshape the playoff race. That's usually where good seasons become great seasons, or completely fall apart. But now there's an even more interesting layer to all of this. The division itself is entering a completely different era. The article talks about major changes involving longtime AFC North coaching figures. So nobody really knows what these teams are going to look like early in the season, and that makes everything even more unpredictable. And Marty Herney said something here that I thought was absolutely perfect. He explained that facing a rookie head coach early can be an advantage. But it can also be dangerous because you don't have enough film yet to fully study that system. So you're facing a team that's still trying to figure itself out, while also walking into the game partially blind yourself. And honestly, I think that's exactly why several AFC North matchups could become extremely dangerous for Baltimore this year, especially if the NFL decides to stack those games late in the season when the pressure is at its absolute highest. And honestly, Flock, I think the Ravens' 2026 schedule is going to depend way more on how the NFL builds this season than simply who the opponents are on paper. Because yes, some parts of this setup definitely look favorable for Baltimore right now. But international travel, long road stretches, and division games landing at the wrong time could completely change the direction of the season very quickly. At the same time, I also see a huge opportunity for this new coaching staff to start strong and build an identity early. And honestly, once the official schedule finally drops, I think certain details are going to grab way more attention than the opponents themselves. Now I want to hear from you. Flock, do you think the Ravens really got lucky with this 2026 schedule? Or is there still a hidden trap waiting somewhere in this season? Let me know down in the comments. And if you're a true Ravens fan and love keeping up with everything happening around the team, don't leave this video without sharing it with a friend who's just as passionate. They're definitely going to enjoy this. See those videos on your screen right now? I picked the first one especially for you, and the other is recommended by YouTube. Go check them out and I'll see you in the next video.